Hey guys, let's talk about my experience with Airbnb. Now, if you guys are thinking about getting into Airbnb, I want to talk about the two properties that I had and the experience that I had with Airbnb. The good, the bad, and everything that you should be doing if you plan on getting into Airbnbs. So personally, I had two Airbnb properties. One was like a shared apartment. The other one was like a full townhouse. And I want to talk about the two differences and the benefits of having them, and also why you should be getting into Airbnb. So the biggest reasons people get into Airbnb is because they're looking to offset their current mortgage or rent. The second one is that actually plan on using it for investments. So they buy a property, they generate a positive return on investment every single month, and they're able to use that extra income for their life or whatever expenses they want to cover. And the third one is they're just looking to buy properties, allow it to grow in value, and use Airbnb to offset the payments. Now, the first Airbnb that I had was actually my shared apartment. So when I moved into Tampa, I wanted to live in a luxurious place. And at the time, the way I am, I don't like paying extra for things that I want. I rented out the extra bedroom that I had in my apartment. I think I was roughly renting it for $100 a day on average, minus the cleaning fees and so forth. But let's say $100. And honestly, it was pretty booked out. So since my location was in downtown, a lot of people rented it out for business meetings, conventions, sporting events, and so forth. So the guests were like amazing, honestly. I had a great time meeting them. You have to be super friendly if you plan on renting out like a shared like apartments. You have to be able to welcome them in, communicate with them, be friendly, give them suggestions on where they can go around the city and so forth, which I personally didn't mind. Like I honestly met like some super cool people. I was young, I was single, like I was still living there like alone, so it's not like they were invading my space. I pretty much worked at the hospital and I had Gentech at that time, so I was hardly at home. So it just made sense to me. Like I didn't mind people in my space. If you feel like you're someone that doesn't like socializing too much and don't like people in their space, it's probably not a good idea. But I would roughly rent it out for 20 days a month. So I would generate $2K, and at that time, my rent was roughly around $2,000. So now I was living in a location that I wanted to live, and my full rent was paid. It was a win-win for me. Sure, I had to adjust to people coming into the house and so forth. But again, like I personally didn't mind it until I got to a point where I knew it was a short-term thing. So like I knew I would get to a point where like I grew Gentech enough where I didn't need to do it. By that time, I was like, hey, I want to live here. I don't want to pay the extra rent. Let's test it out. And I think I did it roughly for a year or a year and a half. And I was literally living there for free. So in my eyes, the way I made sense of it was, do you want to live here for free by being okay with living someone else or like having someone else come in and out? And in my eyes, I'm like, yeah, because some people have roommates and they still have to pay their portions. Now with a shared property, they're a lot more respectful, right? You're not gonna get like a big family or a big party. It's usually like one or two people, like a couple, and they're just asleep, and then they're probably out all day as well. So the place was always clean. I never had any issues. And they always kept it like clean. Like literally nothing was ever broken, and I was always paid out like on time by Airbnb. So it was perfect for me. The only thing is like I had to meet them to give them key until I installed like a smart lock on my apartment. And then I didn't really need to meet them at all. Like I would just create a code for them. They would be able to come in and out whenever they wanted, and it was easy for them and me. So the first property, the pros are that you're making money, you're living there for free. The cons are that sure, you have to accommodate a little bit, and you have someone that's in your space somewhat. So if you're okay with the second one, I would say give it a try, because again, you're literally having someone that pays for your rent completely. Now, after I saw the opportunity of Airbnb, I ended up buying a property just to have it as an Airbnb property. It was a townhouse that was close to a university. So in my mind, I knew that there were always events at the university. There were students. It was also close to a lot of hospitals. So there was a cancer facility that was close to the location. So the way I did my research is that I would zoom in about a 5-mile radius from the location that I wanted to purchase, and then see how the other Airbnb properties were doing. So I looked at the good ones and I looked at the bad ones and took the average and saw what the average night rate was, and took a look to see if there was enough volume for it to make sense for me. So the average property rented out for $300 a night, and I said, okay, if I roughly get about 15 bookings a month, that's $4,500. Now, does the $4,500 make sense for me? You always have to ask yourself, does the worst case scenario make sense? Now, is the $4,500 worst case scenario? No, it's not, because just like when COVID hit, I pretty much lost all my Airbnb bookings. So I had to get someone that was long-term in there. So what is the worst case scenario? Well, the worst is not getting any renters at all. But I knew that like I could always get like a long-term renter. So long-term renter roughly pays $2,500, which my expenses for the property was $2,500. So I knew I could break even worst case scenario. But with $4,500, I roughly profit around $2K a month, which I'm happy with. And if it does do super well, maybe I'll profit like $3K. So I ended up purchasing a property, and it started off pretty well. Like literally the first day I listed it, I had a booking for about a week, and within the first 30 days, I made a 2K profit. And then after the first month, I actually had someone that contacted me. It was 3 medical students that were looking to rent out the property, and they ended up paying 2K per room. I was making 6K a month. I was roughly profiting around 3.5K, and it went super well. And they were there for about 2 months until COVID hit, and the program stopped, and I had to move back home, and literally no one was traveling. So the property was vacant for about 2 weeks right when COVID hit. And I said, okay, I gotta find someone that's going to be a long-term renter. Luckily, I did take that into consideration when I was buying a property, because whatever you do in life, ask yourself, worst case scenario, can I still manage to have the property and not have to, give it back to the bank or have to pay out of pocket? So I found a lady that was remodeling her house, and she ended up just booking in place for 2.5K a month, because I just wanted to get someone in there that could pay my expenses. And she was there for about 8 months or so. And luckily after that, Airbnb was picking back up. I had someone that booked through Airbnb for 3 months, and they were roughly paying me, I think it was 5K a month. So it ended up picking back up. But to me, it was just a headache. So you have to ask yourself, does the income make sense for you? And for a lot of people that are making 3 or 4K a month, it does make sense for them. But it is time consuming. So a pro tip, if you guys are getting into Airbnbs and you don't want to invest a lot of time, is find a system that's automated. So if you can use a smart lock or a lockbox outside of the house so that you don't have to meet them every time, and then have cleaners that you truly trust to go in there, clean the property, and have it ready for the next guest, that changes the experience completely. Luckily, I had a family member, my aunt, that actually went in and cleaned it, and just trusted her. And I paid her pretty well because it was worth it to me. You won't profit everything unless you plan on investing your time into it. If you don't have another job and that's all you're doing, sure, you can go and clean it. But to me, it wasn't everything that I was doing. I obviously had other businesses, and I was still working at the hospital. So I needed someone that can go in there, take care of it for me. But another headache are the repairs. For some reason, there was always something to repair at the property, either the fridge or the dishwasher or leaking toilet or something. And typically Airbnb does cover damages caused by the guests, but something's broken just from wear and tear, they won't cover that. And most of the time I had to go in there and fix it myself, because it wasn't worth hiring someone to come in. Because if I called in a company to come in and fix it every single time, it will eat into all the profit share that I was generating. So having Airbnb property, you're definitely gonna learn how to do things yourself. I never owned a house before. We lived in an apartment with me and my mom, so I never had to learn how to fix things. I didn't have a dad around either, so I was on YouTube a lot, and I was just, going to Home Depot almost every 2 weeks just to get the products. And it's just it's an all day thing, because you get the products, you get there, you find out that you need something else, you go back and then buy the other products, and then go back and attempt to fix it. So literally you waste 1 or 2 days attempting to fix things, and it just it's not something I wanted to do. There was a moment where there was a flooding on the 2nd floor, and for some reason the pipes behind the shower, I don't know what happened, they bursted, so it flooded all on the 1st floor, and I had to actually call a plumber to fix that, because obviously I couldn't fix that. So that itself ate into 2 months of profit by itself. Understand that there are a lot of issues with owning Airbnb properties. And unless you plan on having 5 or 6 properties, it's not worth getting into it. So that was my takeaway with it, because if you have 5 or 6, then you can hire someone on payroll, right? You can hire someone for 3K, and whenever there is a damage, you just call them up and say, hey, do you mind fixing that for me? But when you have 1 property, it doesn't make sense having them. And with 6 properties, sometimes some properties don't break at all. They're good for 3 or 4 months without damages. And the other ones, maybe, there's something that goes wrong every single month, but it averages out, so you end up making a profit. But with 1 property, it's a headache. And whenever something goes wrong, it eats into the full month's profit, and you end up really not making anything with it. So honestly, I was ready to get out of it. It was good the first 3 months when I was making a lot of money, but then after COVID hit and I had like a long-term renter, and then even after that, it never really truly picked up. I was just waiting for the 2-year period so that I didn't have to pay a lot of short-term taxes. And as soon as the 2-year period hit, I listed a property. Luckily, as we all know, the property prices went up, and I sold it for about 60K profit. And I even took forbearance out for the year that I had it while COVID was going around, and I didn't pay really any mortgage. So they paused my mortgage, and all the money I was generating with the long-term renter, I was profiting other than the $500 for HOA and so forth. So I did walk out with roughly making 100K on that property, but I got super lucky. Like, it's not like an average thing. Prices don't just jump like that as they did during COVID, and they don't just offer forbearance all the time like that. So Airbnb is definitely a great thing if you're looking to get into something to just make an extra 2 or 3K a month, but understand that there is time allocated to it and there's a risk factor as always. And if you truly want to use it as a method to generate actual income so you don't have to work, understand that you have to get into at least 5 or 6 properties, but to get into them, you have to have the right down payment. So the first property, sure, you can put it under your personal name, but after that, they all will be investment properties. So you have to put down 20% on each additional property. So ask yourself if you have the capital to get to that point. If you don't, it's not worth it. Sure, you can build up to it. So have one Airbnb property, save all that money, and then put it into the next one, the third one, the fourth one. And maybe 6 years down the road, you do have 6 properties. Then it does make sense. But then again, it's not something I wanted to personally do. So just ask yourself, considering the income and the time and effort required to get there, is that something that you truly want to do? Airbnb was a fun experience. It was a good experience. It was definitely something that, I checked off in my books, and it allowed me to get to the next level in my life. But it's not something that I wanted to do long term because, again, it was a headache for me and it took a lot of time from actually investing it into the business. So I want to hear your thoughts if you guys had an Airbnb property or the reason that you want to get into Airbnb. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.